Welcome into the Locked On Knicks. Today we're going to talk about something I've wanted to talk about for 5 years. Rumors of a Paul George trade. Can they pull it off? Would it make them an NBA title favorite? We get into that now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a potential Paul George trade. Alex, we are 20 seconds into the episode, and I'm already sweating. That's because I want Paul George that badly, and also it's 94 degrees. There's no air conditioning in our loft. But first, I wanted to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And if you want to become an everydayer, and we know you don't want to miss us this week, Alex, I'm going to guess we're going to go maybe 6, 7, 8 times a week. I don't know. You're going to be listening to us more than you're not listening to us. If you want to be a part of it for all the big trades, free agency signing, draft picks that the New York Knicks are about to make, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell to ensure you don't miss the latest in Knicks world. I'm Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of the Strictly the Greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world, and you can check them out on all forms of social media at the strick.land. And Alex, it is go time. This is a name I have been throwing out there basically since the Knicks got decently competitive 4 years ago. Since he became a Clipper, essentially, I've wanted Paul George on the Knicks. He's a little bit older now, maybe a little bit less shiny, coming off a subpar 2024 playoffs. Do I want to give him $250 million on an extension 2 years down the road? Maybe not, but that is not the issue of today. The issue of today is that Mark Stein, formerly of the New York Times, now on his Substack, reports that New York is a potential destination for George. He says, quote, another trusted source has advised me to keep the Knicks on the list as a potential trade suitor for George if the All-NBA swingman indeed opts into the final season of his current contract at $48.8 million. We've seen other reports, Alex, that is looking increasingly likely, that if Paul George wants to leave the Clippers, it will be an opt-in, then a trade. And for a long time, the Sixers seemed like the heavy favorites to get him. The reports in recent days are that is looking increasingly less likely. Are the Knicks the team emerging to fill that void? And maybe most importantly, like, can they even pull this off?
I mean, I think so. First off, I'll just say, like, the feasibility, if it was not likely, or if let's just put it this way, if there wasn't some smoke here, I don't think we would have already heard about the whole the Sixers think they're out thing, because otherwise, why would that happen so early? You know, like, it was just last week that Joel Embiid was making googly eyes at Paul George on national TV, like literally going like, hopefully we'll bring some help in, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know, like looking at Paul George. And, you know, so I think unless the Sixers knew for sure that that's not happening for them, that those leaks wouldn't be coming out to reporters already being like, well, the Sixers are pivoting, just so you know. And then I don't think that we start hearing about this sort of thing with the Knicks unless the Knicks are a real potential destination too, because why would that reporting come out unless there's some actual discussions being had actively right now? I think that there's a very good chance that Leon Rose has been on the phone with the Clippers this week trying to get this thing ready, because I think that basically the Knicks would need to pull this off in this league year. So it's all very confusing the way that the NBA does this. And, you know, I might be off base here. I'm definitely more of an amateur capologist, but I do dive into this stuff and try to learn it as much as I can just for the sake of this podcast and for my own curiosity. I think the best way that the Knicks can get this done and still maintain having Julius Randle on this team, because otherwise I think Julius would have to be part of the deal, would be if they want to get this done with Julius, Paul George opts into his contract around the time of the NBA draft, which is this week, then because probably the Knicks would want to include, or the Clippers would want some of the Knicks picks in this draft included, so that they could start restocking the cupboard immediately. Maybe still try to build around Kawhi Leonard and see if they can still make some form of a run. Although it's tough to say that, like, you know, they would make more or less than they have recently. Like, as long as they just make the playoffs, that basically equates what they've managed to accomplish most years with George and Kawhi, because they don't really get that far in the playoffs with those two. So I think what would have to happen, George opts in. The Knicks then can make it work, I think, money-wise with Mitchell Robinson, Bojan Bogdanovic, opt in. The Knicks can use their opt-ins on a couple of the end of bench guys. I think because it's still in this league year, you're dealing with roster size constrictions then, but I think that the Clippers might be able to just release some guys from the end of the bench before the trade to make it happen, and then it would be okay. Like essentially do a simultaneous transaction where they absorb the extra players from the Knicks and cut their own guys ahead of time. So that then the Knicks don't get that as returning salary. I think the ultimate answer is it would probably be kind of convoluted. Like it might even require the guys from the Knicks going to some other team that has open roster spots and them getting like a second round pick or 2 second round picks or something as compensation for that. But the money works that way. It's just, it might come down to like roster spots or something at that point where you just have to involve a third team just to be like, for lack of a better term, the dumping ground for all the players that you don't want on your team or whatever that are just going to get cut anyway, which would probably be like Jericho Sims, Daquan Jeffries, and maybe Shake Milton. I've seen that he might have a second year option. It's kind of 50-50. I can't really tell if he actually does or not. But so I think that's how it would actually happen. But I mean, if they actually pull it off, this would make them a contender. I think. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, it makes them arguably the favorite for the title next year. I think if they pull it off and still keep all of the star power in play, can move one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA from last year to the bench and have him come in as your 6th man. I still have Josh Hart, who was, the 48-minute maestro down the stretch of the season, who plays as well as he does, and still have Deuce McBride. And, basically you're just having a solve backup center, which you might be able to do by just re-signing Precious Achiuwa then, and maybe drafting someone to develop over time to hopefully supplant him in due time. But man, things would be looking great for the Knicks if this is for real and they're actually able to pull it off.
No, yeah, they'd be tier 1 title contenders. I think they're in a class with Boston and Denver, and I would not put anyone else in that conversation. Obviously, Minnesota would like to argue to be in that conversation. I might even put Denver, which sounds insane to say, but like a small step down for that, given their depth concerns that they still have to figure out, having to ensure that they bring KCP back. But I mean, just a starting lineup on paper of Jalen Brunson, Paul George, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, Isaiah Hartenstein, like you are right there with the Boston Celtics, and maybe Hartenstein is like quote unquote the relative weak link between those two teams. But the Knicks it's insane to say this on a team that has a 7'3" center and 2 of the best, most physical athletic wings in the league in the Celtics. Like the Knicks would just have a size advantage in that matchup, right? And the other thing is, like, to your point, like the quality of depth, like the Knicks would not have the volume of depth that they currently have, but having DiVincenzo and Hart as bench players, 2 guys who showed like, all right, if they're the 2nd and 3rd best players, or 3rd and 4th best players in your starting lineup, like you can win a series against a great team. Like that is like, I don't think there is another team in the NBA, or at least I can't think of one off the top of my head that has 2 bench players as good as Harden, DiVincenzo has. But the combination of just shooting, defense, and physicality, obviously you miss what Mitchell Robinson brings from that perspective. But like the switchability across the board, like having 2 defenders as good as Anunoby and George anchoring your defense is just unparalleled in the league. Like it was Kawhi and George, and now it would be Anunoby and George, like pretty much in a class by themselves. And the shooting around Brunson, the optionality around Brunson, the fact that Brunson just would not be like overtaxed the way he was this season. It would be extraordinary if the Knicks could pull this off. There would certainly be concerns down the line of like, all right, how much money does Paul George want? And can you really keep all these guys? Does that mean you keep George and Randall has to go out? But that would be problems for a future year, and the Knicks would genuinely be all in. And as we keep talking about, this offseason might be the window for them to do that. And the great thing about a Paul George deal, especially with only 1 year on that contract, is it's quote unquote your all-in move. But much like the Celtics, when they traded for Holiday and when they traded for KP and actually picked up picks, like the Knicks would still have some maneuverability down the line, Alex, because there's no way you're making that trade and giving up all 11 picks plus Deuce McBride, right? There is still going to be stuff that the Knicks can move for help on the margins.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be the big thing is that I think at its core, because George has all the leverage here, or at least most of it, to be like, look, if you guys don't do this, I'll just leave. I'll go to the Magic or something. There are plenty of other good situations. I might not like it as much as New York, but I don't want to be on the Clippers anymore. I want to go win somewhere, and we're not winning anything. If that's ultimately what he's saying, he has all the leverage there. So this would allow the Knicks to get out of this with maybe like a couple first-round picks attached, just to negotiate in good faith, and be like, hey, here's one of our 2 first-round picks this year. Here's, I don't know, one, like our unprotected pick next year or something like that. Like we're good with that. You guys can have that, and then you get something back for Paul George that you wouldn't have otherwise, in addition to Mitchell Robinson, who, will be a good center for you guys and whatever, but, and could still give you a solid defense with Kawhi Leonard if he's healthy. But yeah, I think that this would be a potential chance for a huge windfall for the Knicks here, to be able to get him and get him at a huge discount compared to what it would have cost if they were trying to trade for him and he was under contract. But, George, definitely it's in his best interest to also opt into that final year and get traded somewhere, because then he can still cash in on a supermax contract or something similar to it, get way more money, more years on what will probably be the last big contract of his career as he's entering his mid-30s here. But we can talk about it in a sec, Gavin. You mentioned his stats were a little less than great in this year's playoffs, and maybe we could just talk a little bit about how we would envision the fit in just a second when we get back in. So we'll talk about that in the next segment, as well as some new news about the OG Anunoby situation, which broke over this past week as well.
But first, we want to tell you about our good friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, with all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So let's get into Paul George, the player, a little bit, because he has always fascinated me. And like, I think he's very similar to Kyrie Irving in the sense that the respect level he has from other players, and particularly the younger generation, I think is like there is a substantial gap between how players view him and how media and fans view him. Like, players, I think, view him as a legend in some ways. And that's because, like, if it's almost kind of T-Mac-esque in that, like I always remember Kobe saying, yeah, well, T-Mac was more talented than me. Like, if he had my dog, my killer instinct, like he was just bigger, he could shoot better. Like, I wouldn't have been able to match that. And I think a lot of people view Paul George the same way, in that he's 6'8". He is, even after that like horrific knee injury he had, or lower leg injury, broken leg with Team USA, is still just one of the best athletes in basketball, has like a ridiculous handle, one of the deepest like layup packages in the entire league, and is just flat out one of the top 10 to 12 shooters in the NBA, and is an elite defender. Like, you just go like skill by skill. He checks every single box. And yet, very similar to Kyrie Irving, for long stretches of his career, it's been a little bit less than the sum of its parts. And I will say that is more so true in recent seasons, because you look at what he did early in his career in Indiana, right? That was a tough team. That was a fun team. They didn't really have any business going head to head with the Heatles, right? And they did it year after year after year, led by Paul George in his early 20s, which was ridiculous. Then he goes to Oklahoma City, and he has that season where he finishes third in MVP. Maybe he falters in the playoffs a little bit, still put up 28.5 points a game at a time when not every player in the league was doing that. And then on the Clippers, it's been hit or miss, right? Obviously, that first season, that bubble run where the Nuggets come back from down 3-1, that was kind of an all-time choke job. But then he has the 2021 playoffs the next year, where like I was going back today and looking at the stats. Kawhi gets hurt early in that playoff, still gets the Clippers to their first ever conference finals, puts up 27 points per game, 9.6 rebounds, 8.7 assists, shoots fairly efficiently. Like, that was ridiculous. And then this year in the playoffs, after a season where he shot the ball way better than he had the last few years. And to me, that's mostly about James Harden being there. But I also think is fairly representative of how he would play on the Knicks, where he's decidedly the third option, and he's playing with like a lot of other guys who could apply pressure on a defense. Like, he shot 41%, taking 8 threes a game. Like, that is kind of replicating Dante DiVincenzo right there. And then you look at everything else he brings to the table as a creator, like 23 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, 91% free throw shooter. The big thing to note, and again, part of this is Harden there, and PG having the ball in his hands a little bit less, only took 4 free throws a game, which when a guy is like hitting his mid-30s, that is something you definitely want to watch, because it's sort of the ultimate litmus test for where their athleticism is going. I choose to attribute some of that, again, to the fact that Harden had the ball a little bit more. The playoffs, though, were concerning, right? Just 19.5 points, no Kawhi, and the efficiency sort of fell out the window, just 41% from the field, 37% from the three. Certainly did not step up in the way the Clippers needed him to potentially beat that Mavericks team, even though on paper, like, him and Harden, like, maybe should have been enough for them to still take that series to 7. Overall, like, I just think it's a no-brainer. He said some weird stuff this offseason about not wanting to do dirty work, like a championship not being his top priority. Like, I kind of just wiped that all away. Like, the dude is just a killer. He's incredibly skilled. And I think he is KD light in the sense that he fits into pretty much any ecosystem, and the Knicks could just incorporate him very cleanly. And I don't think there's going to be any issue of like, well, I'm not getting enough shots. I don't have the ball in my hands enough. Like, I think at this point in his career, he's made it pretty clear, like, he is somewhat content to play that role. And I think it would involve Brunson sacrificing a little bit, Randall sacrificing a little bit, and Anobi sacrificing a little bit. At the end of the day, I think it would be a really clean fit. And the bigger question for the Knicks is just like, all right, like, are they going to be the team he wants to go to? And are they going to be the team that ultimately gets him? Because one thing we didn't mention in that first segment, like, if he's open to like an OKC, like, there are just teams out there that would be interested that could maybe blow the Knicks offer out of the water. I'm just wondering, Alex, if this is a situation where it's a done deal and he kind of says to LA, like, I'll opt in so you can get something and I can get to the Knicks. And that's a handshake agreement that maybe for all we know is already done.
Well, I don't think there's any way that he does the opt-in unless he's going to a destination of his choice, because otherwise he's just going to control his own destiny and just go. I mean, because like if LA didn't want to play ball and OKC, for example, to use your example, wanted to go get him, they still could, because they could just move some money around, spend some of their picks to just offload salary and get him that way. So, the only way that he's opting into that contract that final year is if he's going to his preferred destination, like whatever that may be. So that basically he can just opt in, get traded, and then August, whatever the date is, it was the same date that like Josh Hart had to wait till last year to sign his extension. Whenever that date hits, then Paul George just inks that big extension wherever he is, which will probably have also already have been agreed upon before he even got traded, but just not able to put pen to paper until then. And then boom, he's a Knick for the next, 4 or 5 years, whatever, to try to make a title run with one of the most ready-made title cores, I think, in the NBA, if you add another superstar to it. As far as the fit and stuff, I'm pretty well with you. I think he fits no matter what. I guess my only concern with him would be immediately washed away because of how versatile the Knicks depth would be in that case, which would just be, we saw a little bit with like OG in the first series last year or this year against the Sixers, where he got put on Tyrese Maxey early in that series because you don't want Jalen Brunson on him because Brunson's not the strongest defender, and Maxey's a super quick guard, super capable of getting by guys. And even OG Anunoby, for how great of a defender he is, just because of his size, just didn't quite have the foot speed to keep up with Tyrese Maxey. And maybe you could argue nobody really does. So it's a moot point. But, we did see like Deuce McBride do better against him later on in that series when the Knicks started kind of using Deuce more on Maxey instead of OG. And then you're like, okay, so now if the Knicks have the starting lineup that they're locking into, that would be Brunson, Paul George, OG, Julius, and Hartenstein, then do you run into those same problems when you run up against some of the quicker, better guards in the league? Like, oh, so you want to put OG or Paul George on them? Are they going to get torched somewhat often if they're all out there as a unit? But the reality is then, especially once you hit the playoffs, stats, playtime, all that, it matters a lot less in the playoffs. You just do what gets you wins. Everybody gets their moment. And if you're playing well, even if George was having some defensive difficulties against some lineups, chances are maybe that would mean OG sits for a little bit. And, maybe OG wouldn't be happy with that, I guess, but that would be kind of selfish. And I don't think he's really that type of dude. He seems pretty happy to just be part of a winning team. And, he seems pretty invested in the team and everything else. We keep going back to he went out there on one leg in Game 7 this year to try to at least make a statement against the Pacers and do something. So, I think that would be my only concern would be, does that starting lineup work against every team? The answer, probably no, but it probably wouldn't matter because those guys would still get minutes. And if you got to close with Deuce McBride every once in a while against Tyrese Maxey or whatever, then so be it. If you win the game, everybody's happy, I think. So, and you run into less issues. So I just think if they could pull this off, this would be, I'm ready to build the Leon Rose statue. You know what I mean? Like, it's like he'll have done everything that he possibly can to get the Knicks to title contention at that point, if they manage to pull this off and keep the greater parts of their depth intact. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll see, if this deal comes together, who ultimately ends up being a part of it and whatever else. But, I think if the Knicks can pull it off, we're sitting pretty here. But also they would kind of need to make sure that they have OG Anunoby locked in too. And there's been some reporting about that. So Gavin, unless you had anything left to add to the George situation, I think we can probably come back and in our final segment talk about OG Anunoby and some of the new reporting on him this week.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't even think like what you described is like a major concern, just because I thought their effectiveness with that switch was more about Anunoby getting unlocked as a rim protector and getting to use him in that. Like, I think if you have Paul George on the ball, you have Anunoby flying to the rim off the ball, you have Hartenstein. Randall's not a great defender, but you just look at the size the Knicks would be putting on the floor, right? Like Anunoby at 6'8", 7'2" wingspan, Paul George 6'6", like I think close to a 7-foot wingspan. Like Randall, like not a long wingspan, but just burly and big, and Hartenstein, like ultra mobile, precious, like when he's in with that group, ultra mobile. Like I just don't think like Jalen Brunson is the spot to attack, but there's just so much length. Like it's very similar to playing the Timberwolves, where you are just running into another arm. And like, sure, like I agree with, like, there's some matchups are going to be harder than others. Like Maxey at this point is just like, he is a like capital S superstar. Like he's going to be tough for any team in the league. Like I would not have any concerns about that defense as long as they're healthy, which is a big caveat. And maybe like we're going to have Darian Vazeri, the Locked On Clippers host, at some point on to discuss this. Like maybe like the injuries is the biggest thing, just because that's more of a concern with PG than it is, well, the guys the Knicks have going out, but it's like a 2-for-1. Like that would be my fear. If that team's healthy on the floor, like I'm not worried about a team other than Boston really in these. Maybe Milwaukee on their best day. But anyways, to your point, they would need to bring OG Anunoby back to bring my dream to fruition. Is that at risk? Brian Windhorst thinks it's a possibility. We talk about it right now.
But first, we got to let you know about our friends over at FanDuel. And I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. And maybe while you get the chance, place a cool little bet on the draft. I'm looking at NBA draft props here, some interesting ones, and you could pick the first 3 picks in exact order. And I'll tell you what, there's some good opportunities to potentially make some money if you think that you've got the inside track on how this is all going to go. For example, seems like Zachary Risa-Shea is the general choice for the number 1 pick. So, there's some options where he starts the first pick and it's as little as plus 150, but I don't know. There's an option here where I'm like, maybe that could happen where it's Risa-Shea and then Donovan Clingan at pick 2 and then Alexander Sarr at pick 3 plus 5,000 odds. I mean, not too shabby. So if you want to, make a couple little bets that could potentially turn into something big, that might be the way to go while we're in NBA draft week here. So definitely check that out. FanDuel, it's the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And a reminder, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and you can start making the most of your summer. All right, Gavin, we're back in, and there's some news on OG Anunoby. And, of course, I maybe a little disappointing that we've seen some players already in this early negotiating window. Teams aren't officially allowed to announce it yet, but things, leak to the press and everything. And Woj has it. And, various guys get the scoops about what's going on with various players. I think Malik Monk signed quote unquote signed a contract already, hasn't officially done it. But
Alex, I was just going to say real quick, I think it's a new rule this year that you can negotiate as soon as the finals end. So that's
you can. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying. So we were probably, when we saw that, it was a little hopeful that maybe we would just see the news break of OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein are coming back to the Knicks. Woo! Don't worry about it. Yeah. But I wonder if maybe the Knicks are being a little extra cautious this time around, especially with OG, to make it seem like there wasn't a deal already in place when he got traded, just because that could open up a new can of tampering worms and potentially cost the Knicks another second rounder. Because apparently whenever the Knicks do anything, it's collusion. If any other team does it, no biggie. They just were negotiating in good faith or whatever. But so Brian Windhorst says that OG Anunoby is not, quote, thrilled with the Knicks' current offer and will test the market. So Windhorst said, let's keep an eye on that. Most people believe he will stay with New York, but there have been indications he may want to test the market because he's not thrilled with what the Knicks are offering. And then Ian Begley said the Knicks entered the free agency period feeling like they were in a good place with both Isaiah Hartenstein and OG Anunoby, but fully aware that they will garner interest on the open market. So Gavin, where are you sitting with that? To me, I'm not too worried. I still feel like the Knicks, I am more worried about Isaiah Hartenstein potentially because he just has the potential to get blown away more by another team. The absolute worst case scenario for the Knicks is that they cave and basically give OG a contract for, I think it's $200 million over 5 years. And, whatever. I mean, I guess if that's what it costs, that's what it costs. It's not going to be great for their luxury tax situation or whatever, but ultimately, like if they got to max him out, then okay. I guess you just do it, because he's that impactful, but they have the ability to do that with OG, which they don't have with Hartenstein. And that's why all this sort of, to me, feels a little like posturing. Like there was even just, I forget who had it, but someone had a report this week that was like, was it Jake Fisher maybe had the report that was like, some say that OG was not happy with playing, third, fourth banana to the Villanova guys in the playoffs and blah, blah, blah. And like all this other stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, this almost feels like it's coming from Leon Rose at this point, just to be like, yeah, tell them all this stuff. Like, make it sound like OG's super not happy, or like saying it to Sam, his son, who is literally OG's agent, on the phone and being like, send that to Jake, tell him that, whatever. And I don't know. It feels very, it just doesn't really feel like this is for real to me. I think there's still a really good chance OG ends up back with the Knicks.
Yeah. So I think this is funny because I was just not to hype myself up. I didn't understand much of it, but I was just listening to a podcast on existential risk and future risk to the human race. And the premise of it is basically like, all right, let's just say there's a 1 in 1,000 chance like humanity will be extinguished in the next 20 or 30 years. Like that's extremely unlikely. But if it's 1 in 1,000, and the outcome is that bad, you still have to put an immense amount of thought into it and an immense amount of effort into all right, how can we put those odds even further in our favor, just because the downside is the greatest downside. And for the Knicks, I look at OG Anunoby leaving as an existential risk. Like at this point, he is just so core to this team and their identity. Post the trade, they became just a completely different team. Even we're talking about getting Paul George, we're talking about all these different guys on the team making a leap. We're talking about them finding guys on the margins. We're talking about them being fully healthy. As is, this team looks to be a title contender next year. Period. No changes made. They bring back Hartenstein. They bring back Bojan. They bring back OG. They are title contenders. And that's where I come to on this. It is an all caps disaster if he leaves. To your point, Anunoby and his representation, which I just wanted to clarify because I keep saying his agent is Sam Rosen. Apparently his primary agent is Fred Katz clarified this on, I think, KFTV. It's Austin Brown. So I'll stop saying that. But I think Sam Rosen is involved in his representation, which is obviously a very good thing for the Knicks. But anyways, Anunoby and his representation are well aware of the fact that at the end of the day, they have the Knicks in a corner here. And I think the only way they could push this to a breaking point is if they say, hey, with me, you played like one of the two best teams in the league and you're a title contender. Without me, again, with the caveat that Julius Randle wasn't healthy, you are a 500 basketball team. So I'm going to say that despite my injury history, despite the fact that I'm probably never going to put up 20 points per game in my career, I am worth that max 5-year, $245 million deal. And I'm not taking a cent less. And I'm stubborn enough to go 4 for 180 with, let's just say, the Sixers and totally screw you by joining over your rival and cut short your window of title contention here just because I can. I just ultimately don't think that happens. I think, to your point, him coming out on that hamstring, Willis Reed style in Game 7, told you everything you need to know. He is totally invested in this group. He is totally invested in this team. He is beloved by Knicks fans. I think that love is mutual. I think he ultimately wants to be here. I think a lot of this, to your point, is posturing. That was the right word, from his agency to try to get more money. Ian Begley went on the Knicks Film School podcast. And he talked about like OG is like a little bit of a different dude. And a lot of people on the Knicks just did not get much of a feel for his long-term commitment, just because he's kind of a quiet guy until you sort of break him open. And he seems like an extremely funny, nice dude. I think his actions will ultimately speak louder to his words. I think this is an effort. If he's in an ideal world, the Knicks would probably give him 4 for 120, call it a day and say, hey, like that's $120 million. Enjoy it. We have plenty of room to go going forward. OG saying not so fast. Give me that 5 for 245. The answer will be somewhere in the middle. Alex, you and I were talking $35 million a year. I think at this point, like the Knicks might settle for 45 a year, which is like a great deal for Anobi with how important he is, with the way the cap's going. Unless the injury luck is just horrific, it is a totally palatable deal for the Knicks. It is a survivable deal for the Knicks. I think at the end of the day, that would be just fine. I put this on a scale of a 5-alarm fire. I put this 2 out of 5. If you want to go out of 10, 4 out of 10, like it's a little bit scary. It's a little bit worrying. I just think at the end of the day, to your point, like it's in the Knicks' hands. If they want Anunoby back, I just cannot imagine that he will not be back.
Yeah, I'm always the more homery homer of the two of us, so I'll just say I'm probably at about 20% a chance of this of anything actually happening. I really don't. I don't think the Knicks make this trade unless they knew that things were going to be that this was going to work out and that he was going to resign. And I really, it feels to me like they're just covering their tracks right now. Like I don't know. And maybe that's just maybe that's just me being a homer a little bit, but I've got full faith in this front office to knock this one out of the park and get OG on the team and get him paid fairly, whatever they both determine is fairly, and have this all work out. So we'll see how it all goes. But we also had some news about Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein and where things might be going with that situation. Unfortunately, we're out of time for now. So tell you what, guys, meet us back here a little bit later today, and then we'll have another bonus episode for you where we're going to talk about Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson and the rumors that came out about them over the weekend. So make sure you have your notification bell on YouTube. Make sure you have the auto download on your favorite podcast app, and then you'll get another episode later today. So keep your ears out for that. But until then, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out.